Flashbulbs pulsed like tiny detonations, bleaching the world to white, then letting it bleed back to color. The folded flag dug into my forearms, cotton stiff with ceremonial starch, edges sharp as a verdict. I held it higher when the announcer's voice rolled over the crowd in that sanctified baritone the nation reserves for its favorite lies. Colonel Jacob Reed died defending freedom. Applause swelled. An obedient weather. Camera shutters stitched the air. Sunlight slid along the chrome of the podium and threw a bright lash across my eyes. For a second, I saw nothing but light, like the inside of a flare. I didn't blink. My knees shook under the uniform that fit as if it had been tailored for someone steadier. I pressed the flag harder to my chest. It smelled faintly of storage and laundry soap, the scent of grief formatted for public use. The blue field was triangular and perfect, white stars pinning it the way pins hold a butterfly, the right species, the wrong habitat. People in the front row dabbed their eyes. A child saluted with 2 fingers, a small correction waiting for a gentler world. He should have been here, I thought, and then corrected myself. He was, in the one place that didn't ask him to speak. 3 days earlier, his voice had broken through a bad connection and found me in the kitchen at 2:30, the light over the sink a weak halo on metal. Nat! The syllable rasped as if climbing out of smoke. Don't believe what they tell you. Static swallowed him. The line died. The refrigerator motor coughed into silence. I stood with my palm flat on cool steel and waited for a voice that didn't return. Now the band played the hymn that teaches a crowd how to stand without thinking. The wind lifted the flag above the stage so it looked alive while most of us tried not to. General Marcus Hale took his place beside me, ribbon bars measuring a life into lines, jaw set to the angle that performs sorrow like duty. He leaned toward the microphone and spoke about valor, sacrifice, the price of freedom. His breath smelled like mint and rehearsal. I looked out past the podium lights to the press row. Lenses glittered, patient and carnivorous. Somewhere in that grid of glass, a single red tally light glowed. Live. I could feel it on my skin like a bead of heat. Light as surveillance. Light as witness. Light as the thing that burns shadows off names. They brought me the medal on a velvet pad. The metal was cold against my collarbone, too heavy for symbolism, too light for what it pretended to carry. A handler in a dark suit placed a typed statement by the microphone, 1-page centered paragraphs, my husband's life compressed into safe sentences. Colonel Reed died a hero. It began with a nation and ended with a period no one would argue with. I didn't pick it up. Captain Reed, the MC murmured, eyebrows lifting a millimeter. The smallest question the machine knows how to ask. I shifted the flag in my arms. The seam scratched my wrist, a small, honest abrasion I welcomed. The colonel would want his country to hear from the person who knew him, I said. My voice came out level, the way comms officers train it. Signal through noise. Jacob Reed died in a uniform. He also died as my husband. A ripple moved through the seats, posture rebalancing, cameras recalibrating. General Hale's eyes cut to me, a warning behind glass. I kept mine on the horizon beyond the scaffolding and speaker stacks, where noon light washed the memorial wall into a pale, unarguable plain. The last words he spoke to me weren't patriotic, I said. They were a confession. Nat, don't believe what they tell you. Silence took the stage. Even the wind seemed to measure its breath. I folded the flag tighter, feeling the triangles compress under my hands, and let the line he'd left me stand in the air between us like a second podium. I will honor his service, I said, and I will honor his truth. A murmur started and died. Somewhere in the back, a camera clicked. One, just one, as if the room were learning a new way to listen. 3 days later, they put the packet in my hands. Flag, medal, statement. Today, I returned one of those things unchanged. The other 2, I suspected, would not survive the light. I stepped back from the microphone. The sun shifted. The wall flashed once, then settled. In the reflected glare, I saw my face and the tight knot of the flag, and behind both, a shadow the size of a nation. The applause didn't come. Respect held its breath. And for the first time since the call at 02:30, the light felt like it might be on my side. We built our lives on parallel tracks that pretended to be the same road. I learned to make signals cut through chaos. Jacob learned to make men move in lines that held. At Fort Bragg, they called us the Reeds like we were a single instrument, his brass, my radio. At parties, light from the chandelier found the polish on his shoes and the rank on his chest. I stood near the comms desk in my head, counting delays, softening static. He kissed me like a promise before every deployment. Clean, quick, breath mint, and starch. Be my clear channel, he'd say into my hair. I'd answer, be the reason, and laugh, because lovers tell the truth in jokes first. After his last tour, the jokes went quiet. He returned with sand in his eyes and silence in his pockets. He stopped sleeping. He started lining up bottles on the counter the way he used to line up objectives on a map. Neat, escalating. The refrigerator motor's low hum filled the kitchen, while he stared past me to the back door as if someone he owed was out there in the dark. What happened? I asked once, careful as a tech with a fragile cable. He rubbed his knuckles along his jaw, a dry rasp. You don't want to know what command makes men do. I do, I said. The words were softer than I meant. He turned on the sink and let water run, a hiss that stood in for a refusal. When he spoke, the sound came from another room. Leave it, Nat. The house learned his quiet. Light pooled on the floor in morning rectangles I used to sit in. Now I stood in the doorway and watched dust float where words didn't. At night, he paced the hall in bare feet, soft, steady thuds, then stopped at the window to watch the flag outside our building lift and fall in the street lamp's glow. Still looks good, he said once, voice without much in it. Even when it doesn't mean what we say. Work kept me fluent in performance. Comms briefings smelled like toner and warm plastic. The secure suite breathed its conditioned chill. I trained lieutenants to strip filler from transmissions. No adjectives, no drama. Clarity saves lives, I wrote on the whiteboard in a block hand that didn't shake. Then I went home to a husband who needed clarity and offered me a flagfold of silence. When Operation Falcon Veil hit the tasking orders, his name appeared beside it like a stamp. He bumped my shoulder with his, the old academy nudge. It's what we trained for, he said, and flashed the smile he wore for everyone else. In the kitchen light, it looked wrong, like a photograph overexposed. I set my palm on his chest, felt his heartbeat work too hard. Come back, I said. He blinked. I always do. The morning he left, Dawn made a pale blade along the counter. Coffee steamed in the travel mug between us, burnt and familiar. The suitcase wheels chattered across tile like nervous teeth. He stood at the door, hand on the knob, and turned like he'd forgotten the right last line. Don't make me a ghost before I go, he said, and tried to grin. I put my hand to his face, rough, warm, and kept it there long enough to memorize the temperature. Then don't be one, I said. News about Falcon Veil came in crisp phrases that made people feel safe. Precision strike, decisive outcome. The press room glowed with soft light and cooperative lenses. General Hale's voice found the pitch that made a room nod on cue. I monitored the feeds, watched hashtags bloom and then get shepherded into acceptable lanes. Behind the glass, the network analysts made little shapes with their hands while they talked about geopolitics as if it were weather. At home, the answering machine left a new kind of message. The absence of his voice. Nights smelled like cold coffee and rain. My phone screen lit my face blue as I scrolled through official posts that said everything except alive. At 02:30, the call came. Crackle, hiss, his breath close enough to fog the line. Nat. A pause long enough to hold a marriage. Don't believe what they tell you. What happened? I whispered. Static. Then the hard, flat tone of a call that had broken itself to avoid saying more. 3 days later, they put a folded flag in my arms. It was heavier than it looked, edges pressing like a lesson. The memorial wall behind the podium reflected the sky back at itself. Pure light without context. General Hale's hand hovered near my elbow, guiding me toward a microphone where a paper waited with phrases a nation had practiced to keep its pulse even. The room smelled like roses and floor polish, the sound of 1,000 cloth sleeves whispering as people stood on cue. I didn't read. I just held the flag until my fingers ached and stared at the light on the wall until it stopped being merciful. Back home, I cleared a space on the dresser and set the triangle under the lamp. The fabric's weave caught light in tiny, stubborn glints. I slid my fingertips along the seam, found the opening where a seamstress had hidden the last stitch, and tucked a scrap of paper inside. A blank for now, insurance. A place to put what he'd given me when words would finally let me write it down. 2 days after the ceremony, the doorbell rang. Reporter eyes, tired, human, met mine through the peephole. He didn't ask for a quote. He held up a small padded envelope and said, "For you." On the back, in a left-handed scrawl, "Falcon Vale, uncensored." I shut the door, slid the lock, and stood in the cool hush with the envelope in my hands. The paper rasped under my thumbs. Light from the window made a white band across the rug like a runway I hadn't known I'd need. The refrigerator motor kicked on, steady as a metronome. I opened the flap. A flash drive slid into my palm, light, unassuming, the kind of object that changes a country without making a sound. I closed my fingers around it, felt its hard, ordinary edges, and understood that whatever love is, it had just asked me to carry it the way a soldier carries a flare, small, bright, and without apology. And the drive was the size of a promise and just as weighty. I set it on the table beside the folded flag, two triangles of meaning facing a rectangle that might change them both. The apartment held its breath, refrigerator motor stilled, radiator quiet between ticks. Outside, the flag on the stoop stirred once in the wind, then settled, as if agreeing to witness. I slid the drive into my laptop. The screen woke with a soft sigh, pale blue washing my face to the temperature of doubt. A single folder appeared, Falcon Vale Uncensored. Inside, timestamps, cam feeds, a file labeled audio primary, .wav, and one with a name that felt like a dare, beacon angle jreed.movie. I clicked the audio first. Hiss. Then the sound of breath inside a helmet, pushed through a mic that didn't care about context. A voice I knew bone deep. Jacob. Abort! Those aren't hostiles. The sentence hit the room and sat down. Another voice overlapped. Cool, clipped, the grammar of rank not used to question. Do it. That's an order. Static smeared the edges. You could hear wind. You could hear rotor. You could hear a decision pretending to be physics. I opened beacon angle jreed.move and watched my husband run into frame from the left. A blur resolving into a man resolving into a name. He waved both arms, the universal no, 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 the body's semaphore when language fails. He stepped between the target flare and the lens and made himself an interruption. The flare flamed white, washing him into silhouette. Flaglight turned cruel. In the corner of the frame, a command cursor blinked, hungry. The last image caught him mid-shout, mouth open around civil. Then the screen went white, and the audio registered the blast as a clipped, obscene silence. I sat back so fast my chair chirped against the floor. The room looked wrong for what it contained. The good couch, the framed photo from a ball, the patient plant in the corner that had survived clumsy watering and neglect. My palm found the flag's seam. The fabric scratched my skin. I wanted it to hurt more than it did. I replayed the clip. Again. Again. The flare burned surprise into my eyelids. When I blinked, red smeared the room like a warning trying to be steady. I scrubbed back to the start, slowed the footage, paused on his face, mouth stiff with certainty, eyes furious and clear. "Those are civilians," he was shouting. "My husband. My reason." The man whose voice had asked me not to believe what they'd say about him. The phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again. I let it. The machine caught it, my voice reminding strangers to leave a message, and then General Hale's staff officer, crisp as starch. "Captain Reed, the commanding general requests your presence at No 900 tomorrow. We'll be issuing a supplemental statement. The nation needs clarity." I looked at the laptop, at the flag, at the phone blinking its little red number like a wound that couldn't count. "Clarity," I repeated to the empty room. The word brittle and clean. I unplugged the drive and slipped it into the inside pocket of my uniform jacket. The fabric was cool. The rectangle warmed quickly against my ribs, a heat that felt like courage and fever arguing. At 0900, the Pentagon smelled like polish and old air. I could hear the building's blood, HVAC whisper, elevator sigh, footfalls trained to hush. General Hale's office was a museum of sanctioned pride. Inscribed sabers, framed photos, a flag that had never touched weather. He gestured to a chair without looking at me, eyes on a briefing card. Captain Reed. Sir. He spoke the way you read a eulogy, when you love the idea more than the person. We're proud to announce the posthumous promotion to colonel. We'll release footage of Falcon Vale that underscores decisiveness under pressure. He looked up finally. His eyes had the little cracks in the blue that people get when they train themselves not to drown. We'll need you to read a statement. I set the folded page he slid across back on the desk with 2 fingers. No, sir. His jaw worked. A tick at the hinge. Grief clouds judgment, he said, as if he'd found the compassion section of a manual. Our enemy's doctor footage. Then they have our cameras, I said. And our dead. He leaned back. Leather creaked. He had the patience of a man used to letting a room spend itself against his silence. Captain Reed, you will honor the colonel's memory, not your fantasy. My husband died telling the truth, I said. The sentence startled both of us with how calm it was. That's the only memory I will honor. We held the air between us like a rope. He tried to pull first. If you insist on this course, you'll find yourself reassigned. Or discharged. Noted, I said, standing. The drive lay warm against my sternum. I imagined it leaving a mark on my skin, a small rectangle I could trace when I needed to remember the cost. I'll brief the nation on my own. Back home, I called the one person who knew how to hold a signal when it hurt. Alan Chen answered on the second ring, his voice the rough kindness of a man who'd taught himself to stop apologizing for asking questions. Natalie, I have footage, I said, uncensored. Source? Anonymous. And me. We crafted a leak the way you set a metronome, starting with a low, steady tick. 15 seconds of audio to a reporter who still owed his first paper a favor. A frame grab of Jacob's arm stepping into the flare. A transcript of the abort with timestamps. Falcon Vale went from a parade hashtag to a bruise you couldn't ignore. Hale's people called twice, first to cajole, then to threaten. I let the calls go to the machine and saved their voicemails in a folder named Polite Warnings. The inquiry opened 2 weeks later. Not because the Pentagon develops a conscience, but because the public did, loudly. Major Sophia Torres from Military Investigations reached out through back channels. Her email was a template rewritten by a person. I can verify. Bring everything. I will carry some of the risk. The night before the hearing, I took the flag from the dresser and unfolded it. The stars scattered under my hands like a map of unkept promises. I smoothed the creases flat, found the seam I'd left unstitched, and slid a small patch of white fabric into the lining. I stitched it there with neat, angry care, my needle-biting cloth like punctuation. On the patch, in my block hand, I wrote the sentence he'd given me. Tell them what happened. The flag lay open across the table. Not a triangle, not a symbol. Just fabric. Ready to be washed if it ever came to that, I pressed my palm flat against it and felt only cotton and the weight of my own hand. No magic, no myth. Just a thing that means what we make it mean. Tomorrow, I told the room, and for once the apartment didn't pretend not to hear me. The refrigerator hummed, an amen in Freon and coils. Outside, the flag on the stoop lifted and fell. A slow, patient breath. I slid the flash drive into the pocket over my heart and slept with the light on. The hearing room breathed old air and varnish, the kind that remembers every oath spoken inside it. Brass plaques glinted along the walls like small, obedient suns. The microphones on the witness table purred a low, woolly hiss, ready, impartial, hungry. I stood in the anteroom with Major Sophia Torres, who wore fatigue like a suit and steadiness like a second spine. You're sure, she said, not as a challenge, but as a last safety check. I'm done being sure in private, I said. She nodded once. Then we do it in the light. We walked out together. Cameras fed the country a room that looked cleaner than truth. Polished wood, measured light, flags that had never learned weather. The chairman tapped his papers into an obedient square. Captain Reed, he said into the mic that made names formal. Are you accusing your own command? I set the flash drive on the table. The plastic made a small, decisive click that carried farther than it should have. No, sir, I said, and let my voice find the frequency that cut through a hum. I'm defending my husband's name. General Hale sat 3 chairs back, jaw set to parade rest, the careful sorrow of a man who had rehearsed. His counsel's pen hovered, ready to object to adjectives. The chairman gestured. Proceed. I slid the drive across to the clerk. The screen came alive in quiet stages, black to blue, to a time-stamped frame that smelled, even through glass, like dust and heat. The audio lined up and found itself, hiss settling into breath and wind and the small clicks gear makes when it's trying to be brave. Abort! Jacob's voice filled the chamber and then kept filling it until there was no place in the room where you could stand and not be standing inside it. Those aren't hostiles. The second voice tried to step on it. Clean, clipped, the accent of impunity. Do it. That's an order. Faces tilted toward the screens, angles of denial softening into something with more joints. My fingers found the edge of the folded flag where it lay in my lap. I had left it unfolded at home. Today I'd brought the triangle, talisman, and evidence. Under the cotton, the stitched patch waited, words cool and certain against fabric. Tell them what happened. The video cut to the flare angle. Jacob ran into frame, arms wide, body language that no language could pretend not to understand. He planted his feet in the beam, a man choosing to be an obstruction when the machine needed one. White burned the frame. The audio clipped. That obscene silence again. The kind that says a microphone just learned a new word for apology. Pause, the chairman said. The operator froze Jacob mid-shout, a mouth open around a syllable. Civil. The room learned all at once what a human looks like when a country tries to talk over him. Hale's counsel rose, the pen finally choosing to be a sword. Mr. Chairman, with respect, the provenance of this media is unverified. The chain of custody... Major Torres, the chairman said. Sophia stood, file in hand, voice a calm that had earned itself. The source metadata aligns with Falcon Vale operational logs. The embedded unit's camera IDs match inventory. Compression artifacts consistent with original equipment. We pulled satellite comms that show a command override in the same minute as the audio clip. The chain doesn't just hold, it constricts. A veteran in the back row made a sound that was not a word. It was an animal noise, low, ancestral, the body remembering something the mind had filed under necessary and finally choosing a different folder. Continue, the chairman said. We played the last 30 seconds. Jacob's abort came again, then the other voice, male, older, more brittle this time, like ethics aging badly. Do it. The flash, the cut, the kind of quiet you can spend a life trying to avoid and never actually escape. The screen went black. The room didn't exhale. Respect decided to try a new shape. A soldier 3 rows up stood, not crisp, not timed to a drill. He rose like a man discovering he could. He saluted the blank screen. Another veteran stood, then a woman in civilian clothes with a gold star pin at her throat. The standing moved the way weather does. Slow at first, then everywhere. No applause, no chant. Just bodies making a geometry of witness. A stand that carried itself. General Hale kept his seat. His jaw shifted once. A tiny muscle flickered near his temple. Somewhere under the table, his counsel squeezed his knee. I watched Hale swallow the thing he might have said if he had been built differently. When people sat again, the chairman leaned into his mic. Captain Reed, he said, voice altered by what it had held. What do you want this committee to do? I touched the flag's edge, felt the hidden stitches like braille. Write the record in his language, I said. He didn't die defending freedom. He died preventing friendly fire. He died telling the truth. General Hale, the chairman said, do you have a response? Hale's mouth worked through positions. The battlefield is fluid, he said finally. We make decisions in fog. Fog doesn't give orders, I said before I could stop myself. Men do. Alan Chen sat in the press row, pen idle, eyes not. He met my gaze and didn't nod. He didn't need to. The light from the camera rig made a warm band on the table. I placed my palm in it. It felt like permission. They broke for lunch with the bureaucratic dignity of people who have trained themselves to eat between casualties. Outside on the steps, the air tasted like exhaust and rain. A journalist with a voice I recognized from Midnights asked, "Aren't you afraid of tarnishing his legacy?" I looked up at the flag over the dome, its cloth bright even in heavy weather. "The flag doesn't lose color when you wash the blood off it," I said. The sentence left my mouth with a weight that surprised me. It landed. People made room for it. The wind took it and slid it down the steps. Back inside, Sophia handed me a bottle of water. "You did what he asked," she said. "Not yet," I said, "because there's always more room to carry." That night, I unfolded the flag on my kitchen table again. The fabric creased where it had learned to live, folded. I smoothed the lines with my palm until the stars lay flat and bright. Under the seam, the patch held. Small, stubborn. I pressed my ear to the cloth and listened to nothing. Sometimes nothing is the clearest channel we get. Tomorrow would be conclusions. Tonight was for remembering that light is patient if you keep it fed. I set the flash drive beside the flag, a dull little object that had turned a nation into a witness, and turned off the lamp. The room held its own low hum. My knees didn't shake anymore. We were not done. But the story had changed hands. The chamber filled early. Uniforms, suits, a scatter of civilian clothes that carried grief like a quiet rank. The microphones breathed their low, woolly hiss. Cameras warmed. The red tally lights blinked awake, small scarlet beads along the back wall. I could feel the heat of them on my neck the way you feel the sun you can't see. The chairman rapped once for order. We reconvened the Falcon Vale inquiry. Papers shuffled into squares. Flags along the wall stood to attention without moving. General Hale sat stone still, counsel at his shoulder, jaw set to the old angle. Major Torres sat 2 seats away from me, file already open, pen balanced on her knuckles like a baton she didn't need to use. "Captain Reed," the chairman said, "you may proceed." I rose. The flag lay folded in my lap again, triangle tight, patch stitched inside, the secret now a promise fulfilled. I set it on the table and placed the flash drive beside it. The plastic clicked, small and ceremonial. "You've heard my husband," I said. "Hear him again." The operator rolled the sequence. Jacob's voice filled the room. "Abort!" And I watched faces flinch in the same place they had yesterday. The second voice followed, command thinning into insistence. "Do it. That's an order." Then Jacob stepping into the flare, body language that any child could translate. The flash, the obscene silence. The chairman held up a hand. "Stop." He turned to Hale. "General, who issued that order?" Hale's counsel leaned toward the mic. "Objection." The word sounded stupid in the room. The chairman didn't look at him. "General?" Hale's mouth flattened. He picked a sentence like a man picking a path through a minefield. "The record will show that authorization flowed through proper channels." "Name them," I said. My voice surprised me by not shaking. "Make the channels people." His eyes cut to me, a flicker of something like respect, or maybe just focus. "This is a battlefield matter," he said. Context doesn't resurrect the dead, I said. "Names don't either, but they keep the living honest." The chairman nodded once, almost to himself. "We have the SATCOM logs Major Torres referenced," he said, tapping a folder. "Override originated from Theater Command. Logged under your credentials, General." A sound moved through the room, papers shifting, throats clearing, like weather-changing directions. Hale didn't look at the folder. He looked at me. "Your husband disobeyed," he said. "He stepped into a kill zone." "He stepped between a mistake and a massacre," I said. Silence. Then a voice from the gallery, an older man with a campaign hat in his lap. "Let the record say it," he called. Awkward but brave. "Say it right." The chairman gathered the room with his gaze. "The committee will draft provisional language," he said, voice flattening the bureaucratic out of itself. "Killed preventing friendly fire." The stenographer's keys clattered like rain. I put my hand on the flag and felt the hidden patch press up against the cloth. words pushing back. Tell them what happened. I nodded once to no one, to him. Further, the chairman said, we recommend correction to the citation and review of command decisions. Hale's counsel tried again. Mr. Chairman. Sit down, the chairman said, and the words were not angry, they were tired. He turned his mic off and let the room hear the quiet he preferred to the voice he'd been loaned by his title. From the back row, a veteran stood. He lifted his hand in a salute not to rank, but to the sentence that had just landed. Another veteran stood. Then a woman in a dark dress, hand over heart, eyes on the black screen that wasn't playing anymore. The room didn't clap. Applause felt wrong here. The room stood, a geometry of respect correcting its own posture. Alan Chen's camera didn't pan to faces. It stayed on the table where a flag and a flash drive sat side by side like the two halves of the same truth. Symbol and proof, cloth and code. When the chairman adjourned, microphones clicked to sleep. Tally lights blinked off and the room's breath changed shape. I felt it on my skin, temperature shifting by a degree that only the guilty and the grieving would notice. Outside on the steps, rain began, fine and patient. A journalist in a wrinkled suit caught me with a question he'd been practicing since yesterday. Captain Reed, aren't you afraid of tarnishing his legacy? I looked up at the flag over the dome. Rain darkened it, made the colors richer, not less. The flag doesn't lose color when you wash the blood off, I said. Then, because the room had changed, because I added, he folded the flag for duty. I unfolded it for truth. No applause. A pen wrote the line down anyway. Somewhere inside the building, a clerk typed, "Killed preventing friendly fire" into a database, and a cursor waited for the next field like a breath held for the right name. Down the steps, a woman with a gold star pin stood under no umbrella, letting the rain do what it was made for. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The light found her face and made it honest. The wind lifted the edge of my flag and laid it back down, smooth. The patch inside did its quiet work, unseen and permanent. The report hit my hands with the soft, decisive weight of paper that had finally learned how to speak. Reclassification. Killed, preventing friendly fire. The embossed seal raised the words a millimeter above the page, enough for my fingertip to catch truth like Braille. I set it beside the folded flag on my kitchen table. Cardstock and cotton, sentence and symbol, finally pointed in the same direction. My phone pulsed on the wood, blue banners stacking. Messages from officers who'd watched the hearing in silence, from strangers who signed only with a branch in a year, from one number I didn't recognize. Thank you. He told me to send it. J. I stared at the initial until the screen dimmed. Jacob's second in command had a letter and a conscience. Both weighed about the same. Major Torres called from a corridor that hummed, fluorescent and patient. Hale submitted his resignation, she said. Her voice didn't gloat, it filed. IG opened a review on the override. Citation rewrite is drafted. They added your name, Natalie, for moral courage. Paper couldn't give him his body back. It could give his name its spine. Send me the language, I said. I'll check the verbs. Outside the Capitol, rain cooled the marble to the color of thought. A journalist, tie loosened, eyes careful, kept pace beside me. Captain Reed, aren't you afraid of tarnishing his legacy? I looked up at the flag, haloed by wet light. The cloth darkening into a richer blue as the rain found it. The flag doesn't lose color when you wash the blood off, and I said. The line left my mouth without heat and found the cameras without noise. Behind the lenses, a few pens stopped trying to be swords and became pencils again. Back in the hearing anteroom, the television showed lower thirds reacquainting themselves with honesty. Killed preventing friendly fire. Crawled the ticker. Then, citation under revision. A still from yesterday looped. The moment the room rose. No applause. Just bodies practicing respect in its correct key. Captain Reed? A young staffer hovered with an envelope and the posture of someone delivering a test result. Committee wanted you to have this. Inside, the provisional rewrite. Colonel Jacob Reed distinguished himself by attempting to abort an unauthorized strike, interposing himself to prevent friendly fire. The verbs were right. I underlined attempting and interposing with my thumb until the skin warmed the ink. Alan Chen found me near the rotunda's cold echo, balancing a coffee and a recorder he hadn't turned on. You good? He asked, the question of friendship rather than a soundbite. I'm steady, I said. We both looked up at the dome's oculus. Natural light fell in a clean circle on the floor. No bulbs, no switches. Just sky telling marble what time it was. It's strange what light can do when you stop managing it. He smiled, tired. We'll cut the piece to breathe. Then quieter. The source who sent the drive, he asked me to tell you he's okay. As okay as a man gets. Tell him I heard him too, I said. The rotunda amplified my voice and then shrugged it back to normal size. Good. Heroics belonged in the footage, not in the hallway. I went home through rain that cleaned streetlight into gold. In the kitchen, the folded flag waited under the lamp's small sun. I lifted it and felt the stitched square in the lining press against my palm. Tell them what happened. I had. The fabric warmed where my hand held it, the way cloth remembers a body even when it's not there. The doorbell rang. 2 short, 1 long. Evelyn stood in the hall with a paper bag and eyes that had practiced being dry. Chicken soup, she said. I made too much. She looked past me to the dresser. May I? I stepped aside. She crossed to the flag with the careful gait of a woman entering a church she wasn't sure still welcomed her. Her fingertips skimmed the edge, then rested flat. The lamp threw a soft halo across her knuckles. They told me my son died defending freedom, she said, voice even and small. He did, I answered, by telling the truth. Something in her face shifted a degree, a hinge finding a better notch. She nodded once, a movement you could have missed if you weren't watching. He was always stubborn, she said, and a smile cracked the line grief had left around her mouth. You too. We ate at the table with the flag between us, neither of us trying to move it out of the way. When she left, she kissed the corner of the triangle like you kiss a baby who's just fallen asleep. Soft, conspiratorial, grateful for quiet. That night, Torres sent the final citation, PDF. For moral courage in defense of the truth. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence as if asking permission to rest. I printed 2 copies and slid one under the flag. The paper's corner nudged the seam where my patch lived, word meeting word through cotton's weave. My phone buzzed once on the dresser. Jay. He stepped in front of the beacon because he trusted you to carry the rest. I couldn't. I'm sorry it took this long. I typed and erased twice before sending. You carried it until I could lift it. That's what squads are for. I slept with the window cracked. Rain stitched the dark. Somewhere in the building, a TV murmured a delayed broadcast of the hearing. When my eyes drafted open near dawn, the room held a patient blue. The flag on the dresser was a darker triangle against it, stealing nothing from the light, borrowing nothing it couldn't return. Morning brought a formal letter slid under my door. Office of Military Ethics letterhead, language unadorned. We invite you to consult on communications integrity and video provenance. I set it beside the citation, 2 doors I could walk through. The radiator ticked once like a metronome accepting a tempo change. I drove back to the Capitol for the public release. The plaza smelled like whetstone and coffee. A line of veterans in mixed uniforms stood quietly off to one side. Different wars, same posture, hands folded over caps as if holding something you can't put down without help. The spokesperson read the correction with no music behind it. No one clapped. A woman in the crowd, no pins, no camera, covered her heart and looked at me as if we were sharing a sentence. We were. As the press thinned, a young officer I didn't know approached with a hesitation that made him honest. Ma'am, he said, does it get easier? No, I said. It gets clearer. He nodded like that was heavier and better. He left with his shoulders a fraction less performative. By afternoon, the networks had retired the old B-roll. The new reel fixed itself in the feed. Jacob's body stepping between a flare and a mistake. The caption in plain white, killed preventing friendly fire, and below it, the line some producer had chosen from my testimony. He folded the flag for duty. I unfolded it for truth. Watching it scroll under footage that still made my stomach clench felt like aligning a picture frame that had been crooked so long you'd forgotten the wall was slanted. At home, I set the flag down and sat with it until the room dimmed. Streetlights came on. The lamp painted a small square of warm on the cotton, a secular blessing. I placed my palm over the seam one more time, not to check that the patch still held, but to feel the words doing their quiet, permanent work in the dark. I didn't unfold it. Not yet. That would be tomorrow's ritual. Tonight was for letting the triangle keep its shape and for thanking the light for staying, even when we had made it work so hard. The Office of Military Ethics smelled like paper and pencil shavings. Work without perfume. Morning light fell in clean bars across the corridor, dust motes drifting like small, stubborn flags. I slid my nameplate into the holder on a fresh door. Capped. Natalie Reed, Comms and Truth Verification. The brass felt cool, then warm under my thumb, the way metal learns its owner. My first case file arrived with a soft slide across the blotter. Anonymous footage. A citation that read too smooth. I tapped the manila tab and felt its bite in my fingertip, the practical sting of new work. Outside my window, the courtyard flag rose and fell, cloth sighing against wind. A metronome I trusted more than applause. Sophia brought coffee that tasted like burnt almonds and inevitability. "Welcome to the long game," and she said, leaning against the door jamb. The hallway fluorescence hummed a low, even note. "You'll hate how ordinary most of it is." "Ordinary is how truth survives," I said. We clinked paper cups. The heat on my palm steadied me. That afternoon, I trained 2 lieutenants in the small auditorium that still smelled faintly of dry erase. "Cut the flare words, I told them, smiling at my own pun. "Say what happened, then let it stand." We screened the Falcon Veil reel, Jacob stepping into light, my breath catching in the same frame it always did. The projector fan purred. The caption held, "Killed preventing friendly fire." A hand went up in the half-dark. "Ma'am, what if the truth hurts the people we love?" "It will," I said, voice even. "Patriotism means telling it anyway." On a rain-polished Thursday, Evelyn came by with a casserole that steamed up the entryway like a small weather system. She saw the folded flag on the dresser and reached for it with the caution of a woman approaching altar rail. "They told me he died defending freedom," she said, fingertips resting on the cotton triangle. "He did," I answered, "by telling the truth." She inhaled, slow, and the tightness around her mouth softened a degree. "He was always stubborn." Her palm flattened over the seam where I'd stitched the patch. She didn't know what pressed back from under the fabric. She didn't need to. "You too," she added, and laughed once, the brittle kind breaking into something warmer. That weekend, I took the flag to the memorial wall. The stone held the sky like a quiet ledger. My reflection looked honest and tired. I unfolded the triangle and smoothed the cloth flat on the bench beneath his name. The stars lay steady. The granite drank the afternoon's pale sun until my palm picked up its cold. Wind lifted one corner of the flag and laid it down again with a soft, cooperative whisper. I bent close and spoke the line I had been carrying like a coin. "They called you a hero for dying," I said. "I called you one for telling the truth." A runner's shoes ticked past behind me. Somewhere a child asked, "Why is she hugging the flag?" And a parent answered, "Because it's hers." Back at the office, an email pinged. Alan Chen, a single still attached. A veteran from the hearing saluting a black screen. The caption draft read, "Public silence, private grief." I wrote back, "Try this, respect in its correct key." His reply came fast. "Perfect. Keeping the light simple." Nights smoothed out into ordinary again. The apartment carried the warm, clean smell of laundry. The radiator ticked a steady domestic beat. I set the metal on the dresser beside the flash drive and the refolded flag. Metal, code, cloth, 3 weights speaking to the same air. When my fingers brushed the seam, the stitched patch pressed back. A small, square pulse. "Tell them what happened." I had sewn the sentence into the lining, but the habit now lived in my hands. On the anniversary of the hearing, Sophia and I stood on the Capitol steps while a thin sun burned through high cloud. The flag above the dome pulled to attention and then relaxed as if demonstrating breath. The stone smelt like wet paper and rain. A young officer paused on his way up, boots ringing softly. Captain Reed, he said, throat tight with a question he wasn't ready to fully ask. Does telling the truth get easier? No, I said. It gets clearer. He nodded as if the clarity cost exactly what he expected. He climbed. We let the quiet sit. That evening, I took the flag down and for the first time since the wash, unfolded it in my lap. The cotton rasped gently under my palms. Inside the seam, the patch waited. My block letters a little crooked, stubborn as breath. Tell them what happened. I traced each word with a fingertip until the fabric warmed. Then I folded the flag back into a triangle, patient and exact, and set it under the lamp. The light found the weave and returned it, small, steady. He had folded the flag for duty. I had unfolded it for truth. Now we let it breathe. They called him a hero for dying, I said, into the room that had finally learned how to listen. I called him one for telling the truth. Honor breathes through truth. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Stay for first-person courage where flags breathe, lies break, and honor outlives fear.